Another day of no new COVID cases sees restaurant owners call on government to relax social distancing measures. New Secretary for Financial Services downplays surge in number of homeowners in negative equity.
Good evening, everyone. No new COVID-19 cases today, with the city also reporting no local transmissions of the virus for a 13th day in a row.
With the city's infection tally at 1,039, restaurant owners are calling for a relaxation of social distancing rules to ease the pressure on businesses.
With the city's coronavirus situation apparently getting better, Secretary for Food and Health Sophia Chan said on a radio program today that people should not let the guard down for now. She admits there have been increasing demands for the government to relax social distancing rules on restaurants or to reopen cinemas.
I've
heard requests of increasing the limit of 4 people per table, especially as it's Mother's Day soon, and we're looking into it, Chan said. But she likened her job of balancing the health risks and people's desire to return to normal life to an art based on science. Chan thinks it would be easier to reopen venues like cinemas if operators can ensure everyone inside wears face masks and complies with distancing rules. Persons per table limits as well as the bans on public gatherings of more than 4 are set to expire next Thursday. Restaurant owners are hoping these measures will be relaxed, given more people have been out and about this long weekend. Long queues were seen outside Causeway Bay's eateries. Chongcheng is seeing more visitors who are locals. Daniel, who supervises this restaurant, says businesses has jumped twofold recently and workers are happy. But this restaurant owner in Kowloon City still thinks people are more reluctant to dine out these days. Families of 4 who want to dine with their grandparents had to sit 1.5 meters apart. They'd rather order takeaway, Mrs. Wong said. Having received $200,000 from the government's anti-epidemic fund, she's secured the jobs of 8 staff members and hopes the restaurant can continue to operate.
The new Financial Services and Treasury Secretary is downplaying fears over a surge in homeowners facing negative equity. He says the city's financial market remains stable and his priority is to revitalize the economy. Haley Joe has more.
Negative equity happens when the current market value of a property is less than the outstanding balance on the mortgage as home prices fall. A recent survey by the Hong Kong Monetary Authority found the number of homeowners in negative equity in the city has tripled in the past 3 months, from 128 cases at the end of last year to 384 at the end of March. During the same period, the aggregated value of such loans went up from $764 million to $1.8 billion. The unsecured portion of these loans increased from $25 million to $81 million. But the newly appointed Secretary for Financial Services and the Treasury, Christopher Hoy, is downplaying fears of a potential housing crash, saying the city's financial market remains stable.
He
says Hong Kong hasn't seen any major capital outflow, despite economic shocks caused by the social unrest last year and the coronavirus outbreak, while the Hong Kong dollar remains strong. He says the government will monitor the situation, but his priority now is to restore the sluggish economy.
We have been subject to many restrictions that all of you can imagine over the past few months due to COVID-19. So the immediate priority is really for us to act together to revive the economy through different measures. And the measures that are subject to the electoral approval, I think overall the economy as a whole has to be our priority.
Hoy added the application for the $10,000 cash handout will open next month and distribution will begin in July. Haley Zhou, TVB News.
A 15-year-old male was arrested for arson in Mongkok last night after a suspected petrol bomb was thrown at a police vehicle. Police seized the item as well as a lighter, 7 glass bottles and a bunch of nails at the scene. At 11 p.m. yesterday, 4 men aged between 15 and 30 threw a suspected petrol bomb at a police vehicle driving past Nathan Road and Boundary Street. They also threw plastic tubes which had nails inserted at the vehicle. No one was injured.
China reported one case of COVID-19 yesterday, the lowest since late January. The patient arrived from Russia and only tested positive after repeated tests. The imported case was reported in Jilin province. The 17-year-old boy traveled from Moscow and arrived in Inner Mongolia in early April. He first tested negative on April 11th before being sent to quarantine camp. All three of his initial test results last month were negative. He was transferred to a quarantine camp in Jilin province before eventually testing positive yesterday. The positive diagnosis came 20 days after his first test.
Elsewhere, Singapore will start a cautious rollback of its 2-month partial lockdown to curb the spread of COVID-19. Selected activities such as home-based businesses, laundry services and barbers will be allowed to resume on May 12th. From May 19th, some students can go back to school in small groups.
With a decrease in community transmission, the multi-ministry task force will progressively ease the tighter circuit breaker measures over the coming weeks. But we need to do this carefully. Even as we cautiously lift some restrictions, we may need to put in place further safeguards as necessary. We will allow the gradual resumption of selected activities and services in the coming weeks, subject to the necessary safe management measures being put in place.
Still ahead on tonight's news.
The diseases are different, and SARS is a much more lethal disease. For COVID-19, the infectivity is an issue.
Senior hospital authority official talks of the challenges in dealing with the coronavirus outbreak in Hong Kong. Local research sheds light on patient recovery post-COVID-19 infection.
This is an important clinical advance that showed a statistically significant reduction in time to recovery for patients with COVID-19 and is the first authorized therapy for COVID-19.
And U.S. authorities trial drug to treat COVID-19 patients.
Welcome back to TVB News. The chief executive of the Hospital Authority's Hong Kong East Cluster says local stocks of protective gear is still short of official targets of having 3 months' worth of supplies.
In an interview with TVB News, Luk Chi-chung admits this issue, plus other problems in handling the coronavirus pandemic, has put healthcare workers under tremendous pressure. Pinky Wong has the story.
Back in February, Hong Kong saw a number of clustered COVID-19 patients, including the Hot Pot cluster and the North Point Worship Hall cluster. There were a total of 32 patients in those clusters. Of them, 21 were either admitted to Pamela Yu Netherso Eastern Hospital or Ruchenji Hospital. Both hospitals are under the Hong Kong East Cluster of the Hospital Authority.
These two clusters of patients indeed has created or posed quite a lot of pressure on us, both in terms of isolation facilities, because there were a surge in admission of confirmed patients at that time. Especially, that was the early stage of the entire COVID-19 pandemic, and we, relatively speaking, we did not know that much about the disease. And there were lots of associated anxiety, fear, and so on. On one hand, we would like to treat the patients to make them recovered. On the other hand, we worry about our healthcare workers, and they worry about themselves, the level of protection, how to do all the treatment procedures.
Luk told us how the challenges in fighting against COVID-19 differ from those in fighting against SARS.
The diseases are different, and SARS is a much more lethal disease. For COVID-19, the infectivity is an issue, Another difference is the handling of feelings, sentiments, both for the healthcare workers as well as for the Hong Kong community. Well, in 2003, I think we did not have the term KOL at that. But here in 2020, so many social medias and every WhatsApp and every post in the a website, despite however little that thing is, it can easily be fermented and in an explosive manner. And that effect, in fact, the harm is to erode into the morale and trust of healthcare workers, as well as the community at large. And in the management of an infectious disease pandemic, trust and solidarity are absolutely essential.
He said currently forums are held once or twice a week to facilitate communication between frontline staff and the management. Looking ahead, Luke hopes to utilize government funding and the 10-year hospital development program to upgrade hospital equipment and review management practices after the pandemic dies down. Pinky Wong, TVB News.
New research shows most patients with COVID-19 make a complete recovery within weeks. Among them, young people and those who had severe symptoms have stronger antibodies against the virus. As Dong Yao explains, researchers are finding that their blood plasma could be used to treat patients with COVID-19.
Some progress in understanding COVID-19's recovery process as numerous patients return to their normal life. The good news is most recovered patients can rehabilitate within weeks without showing any lingering effects from the illness. Researchers from the University of Hong Kong followed some 200 coronavirus patients who were discharged from hospital after receiving treatment. About 8 in 10 were close to fully recovered within 2 weeks. Professor Ivan Hong said the time for a complete recovery varies by age, the severity of infection, and treatment a patient has received. For those who have been on a ventilator, Hong estimates their lung function will return to normal in 1 to 3 months. But he says there are 1 to 2 patients who may end up with lasting scarring to their lungs. The HKU study also found about 40% of recovered patients developed antibodies that are more than enough to restrain the virus. Young patients and those who had severe symptoms, such as pneumonia, usually have higher levels of antibodies after recovery, Hong says.
The university is working with the Hong Kong Red Cross with plans to collect blood from suitable COVID-19 survivors to save the lives of seriously ill patients.
Qualified blood donors also need to meet other criteria. They should be males aged 18 to 55, weighing at least 65 kilos, and have no chronic disease. Dong Yao Nie, TVB News.
The statutory minimum wage rate is now under review. The Minimum Wage Commission expects a slight increase. Since the implementation of the statutory minimum wage, the rate has gradually increased from $28 to $37.5. Terence Chong, an associate professor of economics at Chinese University, thinks there will be an appropriate increase to the rate. The Minimum Wage Commission is expected to submit its review by October. The new rate should then take effect next year.
Protesters petitioned against U.S. opposition to the legislation of Article 23 of the Basic Law. Petitioners chanted slogans and left their protest letter outside the U.S. consulate on Garden Road in Central. They say it is incomprehensible how boosting the city's national security laws would hurt the interests of the U.S. Earlier this week, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo spoke against legislating national security laws in Hong Kong. He said it was inconsistent with Beijing's promises made under one country, two systems, and would harm American interests in Hong Kong.
Overseas again, U.S. regulators are using emergency powers to allow use of the first drug that appears to help some COVID-19 patients recover faster.
What's being called a milestone in the global battle against the coronavirus comes as the number of known infections in the U.S. soared past 1 million, with more than 64,000 deaths.
It's really a very promising situation.
It may not be a cure, but experts say it could be a step in the right direction. Drug maker Gilead has been cleared to use an intravenous drug for hospitalized patients with severe symptoms of COVID-19. Regulators acted quickly after preliminary research showed that remdesivir shortened the time to recovery by about 4 days on average.
This is an important clinical advance that showed a statistically significant reduction in time to recovery for patients with COVID-19 and is the first authorized therapy for COVID-19.
We want to make sure nothing gets in the way of these patients getting the medicine, so we made a decision to donate about 1.5 million vials of remdesivir.
Remdesivir works by blocking an enzyme the virus uses to copy its genetic material. Regulators caution more needs to be learned about the drug's safety and effectiveness. No drugs are currently approved for treating the coronavirus, and remdesivir will still need formal approval. Elsewhere, Michigan's governor has denounced a protest demanding statewide restrictions be lifted.
Yesterday's scene at the Capitol was disturbing, to be quite honest. Swastikas and Confederate flags, nooses, and automatic rifles do not represent who we are as Michiganders.
The president added to the pressure on governors on Friday, urging Whitmer to compromise on emergency powers to fight the pandemic.
Oh man, it's wonderful. It's great.
While several states maintain strict business closures and restrictions, residents in many others are beginning to emerge from confinement. Authorities are beginning to move toward at least partial lifting of shutdowns as nervous health experts watch and wait.
Canada is banning the sale of military-grade assault weapons in the aftermath of the country's deadliest mass shooting.
Last week, 22 Canadians were killed in the deadliest rampage in our country's history. Today, we are closing the market for military-grade assault weapons in Canada. We are banning 1,500 models and variants of these firearms by way of regulations. These weapons were designed for one purpose and one purpose only: to kill the largest number of people in the shortest amount of time. There is no use and no place for such weapons in Canada.
The ban, which includes buying, selling, transporting, importing, or using the designated weapons, is effective immediately. Even before the rampage in Nova Scotia, Trudeau had said a ban was in the works. A new survey shows 78% of Canadians support such a ban. Current owners of the weapons have 2 years to dispose of them with fair compensation. And that is the news. Thanks for watching.
Bye for now.